I'll just sit here in the closet. I'll just sit in the closet until you're
You'll
ready.
be introduced. All right. We'll go ahead and get our seats and get started. I'm Dan Turner, head of outreach and programming. Probably, yeah, I think for me at least, Lee has well, probably better. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I'll just nod my head. We're tough. We're tough.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I'm Dan. As I was saying, that's not important. What's I do programming, and I'm glad to be out here at the Carvers Bay Library. What's more important is our branch manager, Marilyn. Let's give her a round of applause. She does a fantastic job out here. We really appreciate what she does out here, and the reason we're here, I'm here and y'all are here. We really appreciate y'all being here. We got some celebs here with Chris, formerly of the Coastal Observer, but she's nice and retired now, and Jackie Akers as well from the county here. But we're here because of this grant-funded, LSTA grant-funded, A Glorious Cause, South Carolina and the American Revolution, a great topic that we've been doing. This is the grand finale. So you're here for that, and we have a grand, as we know, a grand person who can pull off this grand finale.
Grande.
Grande. Grande finale. Grand dame, a grand dame for the grand finale. Great lady for this, Lee Brockington. But thank you to the Institute of Museum and Library Services. They made this grant possible, this series possible, and our friends up in Columbia, the South Carolina State Library, for administering that grant. So we've had, I think this is the 18th program. We also, over at the Georgetown Library, the main branch, if you get a chance, please stop by there. There is an exhibit, a wonderful exhibit from Columbia, the South Carolina State Museum that's there on the Revolutionary War in South Carolina. So it's right by the circulation desk. Stop by, have a look-see at that. It's really nice. So that will continue till the end of July. So check that out at the main branch in Georgetown. But here at Carvers Bay, we're so happy to be here with you and happy through this grant to bring you Lee Brockington, who I think every time I introduce her, I say she needs no introduction, but we're going to give her a brief one anyway, and then I'll shut up and let Lee talk. But Lee is a pillar of the community across Georgetown County. She's a signature figure here, a treasure, a Georgetown County treasure, and a South Carolina treasure. She is a proud graduate of Columbia College, and she served for decades as a senior interpreter for the Bell Baruch Institute at Hobcaw Barony.
The Bell Baruch Foundation that owns the property.
Okay.
The foundation.
Maybe I'll
the
get that
institutes
right
do all
the
the
next
work.
time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When I introduce you, because she's a wonderful friend of the library. She's given many talks here for the library, and will continue to do so, we hope.
Yes.
And so in her retirement, so to speak. She is an author and editor, just to list a few of her books: Plantation Between the Waters, A Brief History of Hobcob Barony, Polly's Island with Steve Roberts, and the new edition of Polly's Island, Stories from the Porch. Highly recommended. If you want to know something about this place, get one or more of those books, or just come out to a lecture with Lee Brockington. She is a veritable walking history of this place. If she doesn't know it, maybe you don't need to know it. Yeah.
That's good.
So
That's good.
she's retired, but not really. We keep bringing her back for talks and more talks. And I see she's brought her a walking library with her today, even though she herself is one. But thanks so much,
Yay.
Lee
Thank
Brockington.
you. Thank
for
you.
being here.
Woohoo! Yes. Well, and the honor is mine because South Carolina has chosen the top librarian, and here we are at Carver's Bay. Who wouldn't want to come and hug once again the top librarian in our entire state? Y'all know this, right? Give her a hand. Woohoo! And did they name you in March or April? When did you get your award? The other day? Okay. Okay. Yep. It is amazing and good for us to know, not only here in Georgetown County, but also in neighboring Williamsburg County. We get the blessing. I am officially retired from Hobcob Barony, but I'm a history consultant, and one of my favorite things is to support our library. I'm a former president of the Friends of the Waccamaw Library, still on the board, and it's because it's important to me. I started going to the library when I grew up in Columbia, and I would check out all the horse books. And one day the librarian at the school library said, "Why don't you check out anything else besides horse books?" And I was so ashamed that it got to where I didn't want to go back to the library. We had a choice between library or recess, and we started taking recess. And then when I started getting involved in librarians and met Carlethia Rudolph, and as a top librarian for the Waccamaw Library, she said it doesn't matter what children read, or even adults, as long as they read. Might be the back of a cereal box, it might be Goosebump series, and I always think about that. It's just important to be reading, not while you're driving, but while we're together. I have a lecture today that talks about brothers, but that also means women. That means loyalist, and it also means patriot. So, a loyalist, according to one patriot wag, a gossip, is a thing whose head is in England, but whose body is in America, and whose neck ought to be stretched. Well, this colorful quote illustrates the divisive nature of America's war for independence and the intense hostilities it generated between American patriots and loyalists. Historians have labeled the American Revolution as the nation's first civil war. The war between patriots and loyalists was more ferocious than in South Carolina, the British colony where land was a proprietary, a king's grant or a royal grant, one of those three. A colony where ocean tides, muddy marshes, dark swamps, grassy savannas, and high ground had, between 1670, when we were founded, and 1776, begun to yield all that is needed to survive and thrive. As Rebecca Brannon writes in From Revolution to Reunion in a 2016 book published by USC Press and winner of the South Carolina Historical Society's George Rogers Book Award, South Carolina patriots, victorious, crafted the most generous system of loyalist reintegration and reconciliation in the United States. And that means forgiveness, reconciliation, reintegration, reunion. But why? Why were South Carolina patriots so generous to their vanquished enemy? Well, it certainly involves economics, psychology, sociology, and historical memory. And we'll return to historical memory and oral history and family tradition in this lecture. America's first Civil War was truly the Revolution, with the Declaration of Independence read aloud on what day? July 4th, 1776. Patriots banded together to form armed forces, militia, and government leadership that established a new country and cut our ties with Great Britain as a colony. But as with any issue, there was division from the very beginning. Not all Americans were united as patriots or partisans, a word we use more often. Regular military and militia, those part-time militia units who used guerrilla warfare to achieve their goal, many colonists remained loyal to the crown. Patriots or revolutionaries, loyalists or Tories, those names often used. South Carolina was the wealthiest British colony in North America on the eve of the Revolution. Charleston was one of 5 great cities of colonial America. New York City, and they're celebrating something today. Anybody know? The Knicks championship. Y'all keeping up? So New York City was rich at the time of our colonies. Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore, and Charleston. And of course, all 5 of these cities were major port cities. Charleston was our South Carolina political capital until Columbia was created for that purpose in 1786 after the war. Charleston was also an economic and social capital. Many would say Charleston still is the social capital of the world. But the elite of the colony owed their wealth to indigo, to rice, lumber, and naval stores, all with the labor of thousands of enslaved Africans. And on the first ship that brought our first colonists in 1670 to create Charlestown, which is now Charlestown Landing State Park, they brought men, women, children, and enslaved men, women, and children on that ship directly from, not England, but instead from Barbados. We are a colony of a colony. We mentioned the elite of the colony, and by the 1770s, Lowcountry residents lived as a white minority among the slave population, who by law could not bear arms. The ratio of white to black was 1 to 3 on the eve of the Revolution. Whites in the Lowcountry needed the whites of the backcountry, and there was an agreement, a begrudging pledge from backcountry leaders to become involved in a patriot effort to separate from Great Britain, to become a separate country. And with that large black majority in the Lowcountry, there was a desperate need for backcountry support, a number of whom were loyalists, however, friends of the king, or Tories, as they would soon become known. Initially, the revolutionaries obtained a grudging pledge of neutrality from those prominent backcountry loyalists. But late in 1775, patriots began to imprison leading backcountry loyalists, and in response, Tory militia units attacked patriot troops in savage fighting that would set the tone of the brutal nature of the American Revolution in South Carolina. In March of 1776, South Carolina becomes the second of the original 13 colonies to adopt a constitution. New Hampshire was first. Their state motto, live free or die. And by late June, June 28, 1776, now celebrated in our state as Carolina Day, there was a pivotal battle, that famous British invasion, an attempted invasion that was repulsed, turned away by South Carolina militia at Fort Sullivan. That famed Palmetto log fort, and those famous names like Colonel William Moultrie, Colonel Peter O'Ree, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Marion, and Sergeant Jasper. British ships were forced out to sea, and our port of Charleston continued to thrive under home rule throughout 1776, 1777. Along the rivers, at ferry sites, at bridges, at taverns, and at homes, Loyalist sympathizers often gathered and discussed their own strategy. Here we are in the Lowcountry, but nearby, where my Brockington ancestors settled in 1711, present-day Williamsburg County was not in the coastal region, not in the Tidewater area of South Carolina, but instead was part of Frederick Parish, situated between the coast and the interior. Some of y'all have seen the Chapel of Ease, Prince Frederick in Plantersville. Situated between the coast and the interior, the Black River residents of Prince Frederick Parish and of nearby Williamsburg Township were living and thriving in the years of settlement after 1732, and certainly were successful by the 1770s. The very best indigo produced in the Carolina colony was not from Charleston, not from Georgetown, although there were great quantities that were being produced in those areas. Instead, Williamsburg County indigo was the highest quality and therefore was highly profitable. Along with the British demand for all naval stores, lumber, big beams, pitch, tar, turpentine, especially desired for British shipbuilding, both commercial ships and warships. The demand for indigo remained high due to Great Britain's navy blue uniforms. That's why it's called navy blue, because they were uniforms for the Navy, and also royal blue robes. If you dyed cloth longer and deeper, the blue indigo became what color? Purple, nearly purple. Indigo. Well, indigo produced the best and most color-fast dye of all colors, which is why blue was so much more important. It lasted longer than green or yellow or red. Those faded too easily. Great Britain's previous purchase of indigo from the French West Indies was discontinued due to the French and Indian War and tariffs. Remember that word? Tariffs on foreign indigo encouraged South Carolina. The British then encouraged South Carolina to produce the dyes. And it was Henry Laurens, the wealthy Charleston merchant, who declared that the Black River area furnished the best indigo in South Carolina. And indigo was easily traded. Traded for what? For rum, for salt, for flour, for sugar, for gunpowder, and enslaved men, women, and children through Henry Laurens' West African Trade Company, a thriving community along the Black Mingo Creek, planted, traded, and worshiped as dissenters. If they dissented, that meant they were not Anglicans. Instead, dissenters and Presbyterians, due to the numerous Scots-Irish colonists, Presbyterians. According to historians, the bright future of Williamsburg, of Black Mingo, and areas similar in our Lowcountry was dimmed by the coming of the American Revolution. The devastating inland Civil War strained relationships among neighbors and drove a larger wedge between areas of South Carolina, tidal and inland, coastal and inland. Patriots and Loyalists settled into neutral relationship on the eve of the war, and even after the 1776 repulse of forces at Fort Sullivan, today we call it what? Fort Moultrie, named in honor of Mr. Moultrie. But the British did not even return to South Carolina for 4 more years, not until 1780. But in that year, the British shifted their efforts to destroy what they call the Southern Front. Charleston fell in May of 1780, and the invading army claimed a series of strongholds across the colony. The British found far fewer loyalists than expected. Some remained divided, and others were outright rebellious. Diverse inhabitants of varying backgrounds, varying interests, decided on their own to support or rebel or remain as neutral as possible. Many of you know that this Southern campaign was led by British Colonel Bannister Tarleton and British Major James Wemyss, who was dispatched to do the work that Tarleton left undone. Wemyss burned through the Georgetown district, destroying plantations and those so-called sedition shops, which were our meeting houses, our churches, Indiantown Church at the headwaters of Black Mingo Creek, and so many homes of residents, including the home of local militia commander John James. 46 Loyalist troops were posted to Patrick Dollard's Red Tavern at the southernmost end of Black Mingo Creek. The Loyalists thought they only faced one enemy, but British cruelties, burning, looting, pillaging, and fear-mongering only created the existence of 100 enemies, where there had only been but one, said a British officer. And as you know, Francis Marion, John James, and Henry Mouzon moved across the Lynch's River, knowing a superior Loyalist force awaited them. And it was there that Marion and his men had to cross a rickety old bridge, perhaps the one constructed by Charles Wood Mason, a Loyalist and Anglican minister who had come to South Carolina way back in the 1750s, and according to one Williamsburg County native, Nelson Chandler, he wrote in the South Carolina Society magazine recent years, Wood Mason had promoted a new floating bridge in the 1750s across Black Mingo Creek. 1760, he promised South Carolina's General Assembly that he would design it, he would pay for it, and he would maintain it. Perhaps he did. And perhaps this was the 20-year-old bridge that Marion and his troops crossed in the darkness. But the noise of the crossing, mainly the sound of horses' hooves, woke the sleeping Loyalist at Dollard's Tavern. And under the leadership of Loyalist militia leader John Cumming Ball and a man named Peter Gilliard, described as a lukewarm Tory, John Pryor, and a man named Captain John Brockington. Francis Marion knew all of them personally. John Brockington, he who once rode with Major Wemyss in pursuit of Francis Marion on Marion's way to join Nathaniel Greene in North Carolina, my ancestor, on the wrong side, on the Loyalist side. Well, the Battle of Black Mingo ensued, and in less than 30 minutes, it became a victory for Francis Marion and the South Carolina Patriots, despite being outnumbered. Marion's militia proved that a nighttime surprise attack worked well, and this event caused the overwhelming anti-British spirit of the community. So what happened to those Loyalists that were there and in the area after this clear victory for the Patriot cause and the reclaiming local control of Black Mingo Creek and the Williamsburg District? Well, many Loyalists changed sides. Uh-oh, we better get on the right side. We better get on the other side. One particular Loyalist has been a part of my knowledge since early childhood, as my family told us the stories of an early resident of Willtown on Black Mingo Creek. My direct ancestor, John Brockington, was in the minority of others at Willtown, as he remained loyal to the king. John Brockington was born about 1754, a third-generation South Carolinian. I added that for the DAR and the Colonial Jones. His grandfather first cleared and planted near Potato Bed Ferry, property now known as Mount Pleasant Plantation on the Black River, and today managed for quail hunting. John, as the second son, acquired land in the newly created Willtown, a perfectly situated landing inland on the tributary of the Black River. Populated by men of family and fortune, according to one contemporary observer, Willtown residents were also described by Francis Marion as good men before the war, and whom Marion had hoped to convert to the Patriot cause. Early in the war, prosperous men were content. Wealthy planters throughout the Lowcountry wanted the status quo to remain. We like things as they are now. We're making money. Why would we tump the bucket over? Let's keep on doing the way we're doing. The status quo. So Captain John Brockington, who served in the Loyalist militia as needed, and Patriots knew he fought within the confines of the rules of war. He fought within the rules of war, quite unlike Colonel Tarleton or Major Wemyss with their regular British military and aided by other Loyalist militia. Well, by age 23, Captain Brockington lived in what was described as a fine structure on the main street of Black Mingo's Willtown village and remained loyal to the king. A captain in the Tory militia, he once had to commandeer personal property of a neighbor and was the reason Adam Cusack, a patriot, was executed. Cusack, recently paroled by British officials, took a shot at one of Brockington's slaves. Brockington then had Cusack arrested and tried in a so-called British military court. And then Cusack was hung for violating his parole. When the tide of war began to turn against the British, Captain Brockington and his family were forced into hiding with his Negroes. as they were called then. And this brings us to the subject of the famous legend of the sweet potato dinner, a story and a painting done by John Blake White, the only artist of Francis Marion's different paintings to have ever personally met or known Francis Marion. It is known that Colonel Marion's troops were militia, farmers called to serve intermittently from time to time, farmers and hunters resourceful in all they did. Francis Marion's place of retreat was often in the swamps, reached on horseback, on the backs of marsh tackies, small horses from Spanish stock left behind in the 1500s, bred in the wild and hardy, sure-footed, the mustangs of South Carolina swamps, marsh tackies. One known hideout for Francis Marion was called Snow's Island, and archaeology by South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology helps us understand more about Snow's Island in the Pee Dee region between the Pee Dee River, Big Pee Dee and the Little Pee Dee. The subject of the painting is a British officer meeting with Francis Marion. Y'all have seen it. Red coat, fire, Oscar, Francis Marion's enslaved assistant. Well, in his red coat and surrounded by Francis Marion's troops, white men, Native American men, and black, including Oscar, the British officer is believed by some to be a member of the Loyalist militia, my own ancestor, Captain John Brockington, a Tory, opposite of the Patriots. A landowner in Williamsburg County, a large slave owner, a Loyalist militia member who may have been taken blindfolded to Francis Marion's encampment for Brockington's request for a prisoner exchange. The legend continues that Francis Marion invited him to eat dinner with him, and what was offered? Sweet potatoes baked in a fire. Sweet potatoes, easily grown and easily stored. Sweet potatoes which traveled well and were cooked easily, full of nutrients and nice and sweet. These potatoes were ideal for Francis Marion's militia to bring from their farms. But please know, all of these militiamen were farmers and hunters and good shots. I'm sure that they dined also on deer, turkey, raccoon, possum, turtle, fish, alligator tails, and even rat snakes could be on the menu at any time. They weren't just surviving on sweet potatoes, as so goes the legend. At this particular sweet potato dinner, a deal was struck, and Captain John Brockington he agreed to no longer take up arms against the Patriots, to remain neutral for the rest of the Revolutionary War. And so, the British surrender at Yorktown, the sweet potato dinner, the horrors of the Revolution, churches and homes pillaged and burned, livestock stolen or burned, created bitterness and unease among the people. That angry spirit rallied patriots to complete the rout of the British from South Carolina, from North Carolina, and that led to the British surrender at Yorktown. And finally, by December 1782, the British forces finally evacuated Charleston. And so begins the business of rebuilding, of reconciliation, and the removal of the last loyalist. Banishment? Confiscated lands? Imprisonment for treason? Well, the South Carolina legislature passed a series of acts banishing former Tories from the state and the confiscation of their lands. The people of Prince Frederick's Parish on the Black River voiced support for these measures. In Nelson Chandler's 2004 article, again for the South Carolina Historical Society, he writes, "The people of the parish submitted a petition in 1783 that no amnesty be granted and that new laws be strictly enforced. We shudder at the very thought of your giving those abandoned, self-murdering wretches a sanction of taking us by the hand as friends. We do recommend that the confiscation bill be supported and strengthened." Well, Captain John Brockington fell subject to those measures. His name remained on the confiscation and banishment list for the duration of the post-war years. And although he submitted a petition for relief in 1783, it was dismissed, especially because of a petition of Adam Cusack's 5 children. You remember Adam Cusack, who was hung because of violating his parole. But in practice, the state's policy toward former Loyalists was more lenient than it appeared. Captain John Brockington did have to hide out for 3 years, not far from Willtown, hide out in the swamps, in the woods. But by 1786, the residents, the former Patriots at Black Mingo, arrived at the conclusion that men like John Brockington had suffered long enough. 2 petitions were sent to the legislature. In the first, John Brockington appealed for relief, pleading for the sake of his unhappy wife and his several helpless children who had been reduced from easy circumstances to misery and want. He expressed heartfelt sorrow that they should suffer and requested a mitigation of his sentence. The second petition was submitted by Patriots on behalf of Brockington's family. Francis Marion supported John Brockington by saying he was, as Governor Rutledge described, just a 6-month man. Think of National Guard, think of State Guard. He got involved in militia, but really only served about 6 months, according to Governor Rutledge. According to other documents, Nelson Chandler found the words at the South Carolina Department of Archives and History in the petition, "We are willing to forgive and forget the injuries done by those who rendered themselves obnoxious to the Commonwealth." More than 80 people signed the proclamation, including Patrick Dollard, who is described as the Patriot of 1776. Other supporters included the families of Scrivens and Neesmiths. Brockington's estate was put in trust for his children as a compromise, and he was allowed to live with his neighbors, but he could not own any more land. Some tensions remained among his sons-in-laws, and John Brockington never completely reformed either. According to his great-grandson's work, John Gautier Presley's family journal, once when 2 of Francis Marion's former officers came to Willtown, Brockington dressed up his 2 young sons in leftover old British uniforms and had them march out on the square in front of the 2 old Whigs, the old Patriots, and John Brockington greatly enjoyed their anger. Even following the war, Patriots could not all be supportive of the national government's new constitution. Again, the coastal and tidewater region differed from the backcountry to which many in Williamsburg District identified. Support versus suspicion. Post-war disagreement included the lack of a Bill of Rights, a guarantee of liberty, and some local control. But a narrow vote of 4-3 stood in contrast to Georgetown and Charleston's unanimous support. The future of former Loyalists was uncertain in the late 18th century. Naturally, victorious Patriots may have wanted to punish the defeated Loyalists who faced a grim future. Would they suffer prosecution? Would they recover lost property? Would they find a place in the new order? In Rebecca Blanton's book, From Revolution to Reunion, she states that despite suffering the worst horrors of the Revolution's Civil War, South Carolina Patriots crafted the most generous system of Loyalist reintegration and reconciliation in the U.S. And the why is revealing. Why did South Carolina have that description? Most who sided with Great Britain did so more for practical reasons than true loyalty to the crown. Both sides terrorized. Both sides tortured, plundered, and massacred each other, and each atrocity fueled wartime retributions. But somehow South Carolinians created a generous system of post-war generosity. South Carolina did not resort to the local criminal trials of Loyalists for war crimes, fearing it would only heighten bad feelings and create kangaroo courts. Instead, leaders centralized punishment and used the state legislature to target Loyalists. A mere 230 of the most open and obnoxious Crown supporters were punished. In the end, half of 115, had their estates confiscated and sold to the public. And why just half? Due to successful petitions, officials' unwillingness to evict piteously weeping Loyalist women and children from their homes. Only 47 former Loyalists had to pay a one-time tax on their estates, but South Carolina did not prosecute those who refused to pay the tax. And by 1784, the legislature, in essence, offered clemency to all but the most intolerable resident Loyalist. By welcoming Loyalists back into the fold, Judge John Grimke had something to say. And if you've been following South Carolina history, his name might ring a bell. Judge Grimke had two daughters who left their privileged childhood and became abolitionists. First in Charleston, they left the Anglican Church and joined the Quaker Church, and then they found out the Quaker Church invited blacks to their services, but the women had to be separate. And they said, well, this isn't for us. So one sister moved to Philadelphia, and later the second sister, and they were some of the first women that spoke at places like libraries or lecture halls. One even built for the purpose in Boston to be big enough to hold all the people that were interested in abolition. And when I say abolition, what do I mean? Abolish, get rid of slavery. So two women that grew up with all the wealth and riches in downtown Charleston, outlying plantations, saw what was going on with slaves and fought, lectured, campaigned for abolition. So Judge Grimke and another man named Christopher Gadsden, who lived in Charleston but also owned Beneventum Plantation just off Pringles Ferry Road. Some of y'all pass it when you go back and forth to Georgetown. So Grimke and Gadsden argued that leniency would create a grateful set of citizens and go a long way toward a prosperous and stable society in the wake of the war. And it helped preserve the elites, the upper class who had social and emotional ties. And since the Revolutionary War had come late to South Carolina, many patriots and loyalists had remained in business and in personal relationship for a long time. And in closing, loyalists responded. They demonstrated their loyalty to the state and their value as citizens to the community. Within a short time, former loyalists quickly slipped back into the same social and economic positions they had held before. This brothers' war left wounds to be healed, but forgiveness is a powerful thing. I believe Christopher Gadsden's wise words can continue to lead us. He that forgets and forgives the most is the best citizen. He that forgets and forgives most is the best citizen. So as we commemorate, not celebrate, but commemorate the Revolutionary War, let's try to remember those words about forgiveness, forgetting, moving on, and becoming the best citizens we can be, not only for Georgetown County, Williamsburg County, but especially for the state of South Carolina and the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have someone up front that had a question, or were you just waving at me? That's an essay I wrote, yes. Sometimes I call it a lecture, but it's about a 14-page essay. How long were the essays you had to write at school last year? About 5? Yep, yep. What I like to do when I write a lecture, some of my thoughts are original. Some of them are based on oral history, which means people that told the legends and told the stories. But also a good thing to do is once you've heard a story or think of it as a legend, you need to go back to the books and find out if our archaeology or our research can prove that that legend is true or not true. The legend of Francis Marion has been a large one. We've learned a lot of things are legend and are not necessarily what Francis Marion did, but he was so great and he was so amazing. Sometimes the truth is enough, but sometimes embellishments, extra descriptions of how great they were. But also when I write an essay or a lecture, I also like to quote some of the authors, some of the researchers, some of the archaeologists who have done the work And my job is to bring you the words, the thoughts of so many others. It was mentioned that I was the former senior interpreter. For a while, I was director of interpretation, and that means what story do we tell and how do we tell the story? My old name tag said director of interpretation, and somebody said, "How many languages do you speak?" Because so often when we interpret, we're thinking somebody speaking German and we need to interpret it. Somebody speaking French. Think about how many interpreters they just had at the G7 conference, being able to interpret and repeat the language. Well, interpretation means also in history, what is the story? How do we tell it? What do we put in? And what do we take out? And that's a big part of y'all writing reports, and what's longer than a report, sometimes an essay. And then next time I come, y'all will have to tell me the difference in a report and an essay, because there is a slight difference, isn't there? Adults, yes. But think about how many books are available now. Think about how many events are coming up. I'll leave here today and drop in at a book reading on Front Street by a woman who's just written a children's book called Colonial Georgetown, and a local artist did all the illustrations. There are so many things happening also for Carolina Day. I mentioned that June 28th, the Palmetto Log Fort that really begins so much of our South Carolina history. And then we'll continue not only through the 4th of July with a free concert on the grounds of the Kaminsky House Museum with a certain short MC you might recognize there, talking a little bit more in between the good music. But also we'll continue to commemorate the Revolutionary War through 2030s, because the war, we began to talk about it in 1775, so we started commemorating it last year. 1776, we continued fighting until 1782, and then the British didn't really leave for a whole nother year, and we still have other things to commemorate. Even when the battles ended, this healing, the communication, coming back together, forming one state, forming one country was a big job. So we'll continue to commemorate, we'll continue to have events through 2030 something. I don't do the math on Thursdays. 2033, thank you so much, yes. I always felt like when we went to cemeteries that the death date should be first and the birth date below it, so we could do the math a little easier. Yes, sir. Geography. Remember, I mentioned the back country. So we're thinking about what is now Anderson County, Spartanburg County, York County, Inlet, Lexington, even in Richland County. And of course, we refer to them as counties now, but that entire back country became real important. Those patriots fought hard and fought well, and then when the war ended, to ask them to return all the way to Charleston. Well, before the war, the back country had found out that by the time they got all the way to Charleston, the vote had already been made. The money had already been allocated. If you think about our geography, South Carolina is an upside-down triangle. And if everything's happening at the bottom of that triangle, and think about how many rivers they had to cross. We didn't have many bridges then. And think about crossing just for Georgetown to get to Charleston. We have to cross so many rivers, the Black River, the Big PD River. Then we have to think about Sandpit River. Then we have to think about Alwyndaw Creek, North Santee, South Santee, the Wando, and then the Cooper just to get to Charleston. And if it's heavy rains like we've had in the past, think about how just difficult to go from Georgetown to Charleston, much less to come from Rock Hill, from Spartanburg, from Greenville, from those areas. So it was a great compromise, and the goal was to put it in the middle of the state. And so Columbia was a planned city, one of the few in the nation. Washington, D.C. was a planned city, streets, roads, where the State House is in connection with the main street, where the river is, which brought passengers in some cases to the area. So Columbia by 1786. But I'll tell you a secret. When Georgetown County's PD River plantation owner, Robert F.W. Alston, was elected governor in 1856, he bought his own governor's mansion because there wasn't an official governor's mansion in Columbia, even though it was the political capital. He bought a townhouse in Charleston because Charleston was still the social capital. And women, I'm sad to say, he also said, I bought a house in Charleston, the finest house built by Nathaniel Russell, which is still open as a museum house today. But so fine, so beautiful, so perfectly located in Charleston, not just for his business and his entertaining as governor, but because he had 2 unmarried daughters. And the women in the room know what I'm talking about, going back to dowries and all that. So Columbia became a capital on purpose. There'd been no other town or city where it was located. It was planned, center of the state, geography. Good question. And I'm always glad to have questions come to me at other times, whether it's through Facebook, through email, through a text, or through the library. And I hope to continue seeing each one of y'all over and over for at least, 20 more years of being a history consultant? I hope so. I hope I'll continue to be able to talk. And I hope as long as I'm talking, I have something interesting to say. Thank you so much for having me, and great to be back at Carver's Bay.
Yeah.